Please join the national anthem in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Marcus Cannon, can you lead us in invocation?
Please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we're just so gracious for another day in your creation to experience it, Lord. Thank you for the rain you've sent us. Lord, be with anybody that was affected by the strong storms, Lord. Just we pray that they will restore their lives. Lord, be with those that are sick and less fortunate than us. Just give them comfort and guidance. Lord, please continue to be with this club as we continue to serve out our motto, service above self. Lord, we ask blessings upon this meal we're receiving. We ask it in Christ Jesus' name.
Amen.
Mr. Terry.
Thank you, President Rick. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a good Monday. Maybe we all got enough rain this weekend. All the moms here had happy Mother's Day. I know you heard that a couple of times. Moms are so special. I feel compelled to say that to moms, grandmas. Happy Mother's Day. I hope it was great. Before we celebrate the one birthday that we have, so imagine who it can be. You'll know that in a moment. Let's spend a moment reflecting. Jerry Atkinson's wife, Jane, passed away on Saturday. And so special thoughts and prayers for peace and comfort for the family. The funeral service will be held on Tuesday, May 13th, at 2 p.m. at First United Methodist Church. And family will receive friends from 1 to 1:45 prior to the service at the park. That's at First United Methodist at 2 o'clock Tuesday. So let's celebrate the one birthday. Imagine who it is. Since I said it was a big one. Anybody got any guesses? That's it for the week. Thank you. Well, yeah, he's giving it. President Rick Reichert on May 13th.
Miss Fran, introductions of guests and visiting Rotarians.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we have 5 guests. John Gormley, guest of the club. Oh,
Stanley.
all right, there it is. Thank you, John. Russell Pausell, our speaker. Guest of Valerie Russell. Melanie Hill, guest of Walter Hill. Brandy White, guest of Dennis Coe. And Vince Wade, also guest of Dennis Coe. Thank you all very much for being with us.
Hello, then. This bond citizen, you're up. $387 points. Last 4, 1, 2, 6, 3. 1263.
Give me one order. I have never won. Today is today. No, it's not.
You got a discount. If I can, Mr. Greg Hendricks. That was some presentations.
Well, as I've talked about once or twice in the last 3 or 4 years, a few years ago, Anita McFay, who was the president-elect of the Tuesday Club, and my wife and I were over at her house for a get-together, and I said, Anita, what do you think about bringing back what used to be the Tuesday Club's main fundraising event, which was the Rotary Ball? And she said, Greg, that's a great idea. So we got a group together, and 3 years ago had the first Rotary Ball, and that went well. And one thing this teaches a person is it takes a lot of people to put one of these things together. So we had several members of the committee here from our club, and I would like for them to come forward, and I have a little something for them. So if they would come forward, Marcus Cannon, Brad Harris, Alan Richard, Cal Whaley, Margaret Platt, thank you guys. You all made it a lot of fun. You all worked hard, and you greatly appreciated. Let me get the right certificate to the right Margaret. Cal, Alan, Brad, Marcus. Let's give these folks a round of applause. And then James Etheridge is representing the Rotary Miracle Field, and we'd like to present him with the big check. We raised $15,000 and change this year, which was the best year. We're very appreciative of all the members of the club and businesses that helped the fundraising and bought tables. And I think in 3 years we've given $40,000 to the Miracle Field. So we appreciate it.
I just want to say a special thank you. Oh, you got never mind.
I would like to thank Greg Hendricks. I was on that committee. He did a great job. Thank you, Greg.
We just had a big day yesterday, Mother's Day. And we have a lot of mothers in here today and grandmothers. And, grandmother who's got triplets. And we're gonna have a mother to be. We'll have a new one.
There you go.
Yes, give it back. So special blessings to y'all. Thank y'all. I look forward to my mom. She raised me growing up. So God bless her and God bless all your moms out there. Let's get started. Ms. Valerie Russell.
Thank you. I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Sally Smith, but Sally did not come alone. She brought President of the Alabama Association of School Boards, Russell Clausell, and also District Director of, in our area, Melanie Hill. Thank you so much for coming. So now let's talk about Sally Smith. She is the Executive Director of Alabama Association of School Boards. She joined the staff in 1986 and previously served as an Assistant Executive Director, Director of Public Relations, Director of Communications, and Director of Research and Special Projects. She was appointed Executive Director in June 2007. In her leadership capacity, she manages the Association Affairs, directs legislative efforts, advises the AASB membership, and oversees efforts to build public support for schools and to expand learning opportunities and services for school board members. She advocates for public school students and school board interests before the Alabama legislature, the State Board of Education, and Congress. She also is the treasurer of AASB's Risk Management Cooperative. Career successes include enactment of the Student First Act, School Board Governance Improvement Act, expansion of member services, and relocating the AASB headquarters to a new expanded facility adjacent to the Capitol complex. On the national level, Smith has been engaged in national school leadership organizations and was on the inaugural board that formed the new National Organization for School Leadership Consortium of State School Board Associations. Sally is a former newspaper reporter. She has received awards for her writing and publications from the National School Public Relations Association, the Public Relations Council of Alabama, and the Alabama Press Association. A native of St. Louis, Sally earned her bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Missouri and her law degree from the Birmingham School of Law. She was admitted to the Alabama State Bar in 2003. Sally and her husband, Tom, have a blended family of 6 children and 7 grandchildren. I introduce to you Miss Sally Smith. Welcome.
You gotta give me a second. I gotta come down here because I like to be good with folks. And my first note to self will be to shorten that. But I've been around, I've seen a thing or two, like that advertisement, I've seen a thing or two. But what warms my heart is working for public education. And I have to say, a lot of friends came out to see me. So if you're a school board or a former school board member, please stand up. Working in the school system. Yeah. Appreciate what they do. I know they work hard and it's really tough. And Valerie, you forgot her other title. If Russell is president, that means she is the first lady of school boards across the state. So it's really kind of conspicuous having your president and boss standing behind you in a presentation. So I asked him if he wanted to say anything. Do you want to say anything?
You have it all.
I love it. My friends came up and said they want to make sure I don't embarrass them. So when Valerie asked me to speak, I do a lot of public speaking, but normally I'm training. I'm talking about other issues. And she said, I want you to talk about the future of education. And I was like, ooh, that's not something I do a lot. And she said, you might want to talk about the Choose Act or some other things. And so I wasn't sure I was confident to talk about the future of education. Like I said, I've seen a thing or two and I can tell you a thing or two. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. I can define what future is, and I can tell you right now, there are a lot of dynamics that are impacting education. Now, the problem is you only give me about 20, 25 minutes to do this. So I'm going to take the treetops on some of these issues, and if we need to go back and talk about them a little bit more, we can do that. Does that sound good? We can do that? Because a dynamic means it is something that can affect the stability or development. And we've got a lot of those going out there. Now, when I said I was a little uncomfortable about this, I thought, today we're pretty critical of people who are in the public limelight. And so I kind of wanted to subtitle this maybe 2 Truths and a Lie. And I thought that might be just a little too sarcastic for this group, so that's a way to get to know me. Here's 2 truths and a lie about Sally Smith, not from my bio. So, anyone want to pick out the lie? I still know my soliloquy from Queen Aggravain and Once Upon a Mattress. I have not hiked the Appalachian Trail. What I know about bowling is that my handicap helps the team because I'm really a bad bowler. But nonetheless, I'm going to try to be very truthful through this presentation. But I did pick that topic or that header for a reason because everyone has a perspective. Everybody has an angle. And I'm going to remind you about that from time to time because my angle is public education. We are at ASB unabashedly pro-public education. Used to be, that was pretty common. That wasn't any rare. But we believe in public education, and every member, every school board in Alabama is a voluntary member of ASB. We're proud of that. In other states, it's not 100%. In other states, there might be rival organizations. And I think that says a lot about our school board members. We do that because we are all about public education. 100% membership is rare. The other thing you need to know about, and we're going to get into talking some uncomfortable topics, we're nonpartisan. It's really hard in this day and age to be nonpartisan, but public education is not a partisan issue. Now, it's not to say we're not going to talk a little bit about politics. And so I don't want to get into anybody's face. I don't want to offend anybody. We all have a perspective, and our perspective is what's good for the boys and girls in our public education system. Public education is the backbone of Alabama. More than 90% of our students come from that. That is our workforce, and that is where our passion comes. And our goal as an organization is to support the Houston County Board of Education and to support the Dothan Board of Education to make them be all that they can be. Going to do a little bit of commercial here real quick though. Here is from, well, I got ahead of myself. So let me talk about, there we go. When I say the future of education, I'm going to talk about 6 dynamics, and these are the treetops I am going to hit pretty quickly. They are the social wars or the culture wars. Probably heard a little bit about that. Improving achievement, but ... The Choose Act. Probably y'all heard about that. Threats to the ETF. The ETF is the Education Trust Fund. That is the major source of funding education in the state of Alabama. Workforce challenges, probably something you can relate to, those of you who are employers and trying to hire folks. And who's in charge? When I look at that, it kind of looks like a Jeopardy board, and they sound like Jeopardy categories. But anyway, moving along, we talked a little bit about ASB. Did I do something wrong? There. All right. And this is a commercial. These are on our website, but I'm going to skip those in the essence of time. Dothan, Houston County, this is the service we provide, so you know a little bit about funding education. And I'm going to go right to the juicy stuff. I mentioned, you know, everybody has an angle, and each of these slides has an unusual photo with it to show it depends on how you're looking at it, depends on what your perspective is. In this case, this was somebody that's on the ground. They just flipped the angle of the camera to take that. But point of view matters, and there are culture wars in our country and in our state. We see it in education in terms of a lot of legislation that's introduced regarding drag shows, transgender children, don't say gay, DEI, SEL, parents' rights, et cetera, et cetera. These can be sometimes divisive issues, but I tell you, if you ask your veteran educators, these are not things we deal with on a day-to-day basis. This is a social phenomenon. This is a political phenomenon. You know, occasionally, does somebody say the wrong thing? Does the wrong book get here and there? But we're not doing drag shows. There is not an effort to indoctrinate your children in public schools. In Alabama, I would know about it. Your superintendents would know about it. And so this is one of those social myths that are out there that's very concerning to us in public education because it makes it very easy to undermine your investment into public education. As I said, from time to time, does the wrong book get chosen? Does the teacher have a lesson that, on hindsight, we shouldn't do? Yeah, that happens. But your school principals, your superintendents, and your school boards would take care of that if you address it instead of going to social media. Most of the stuff you see circulating is old material, and I've talked to some of the ones who are promoting in Alabama, and I said, hey, did you go to your school board member? Did you go to the principal? And they said, well, no, it was a complicated time in my life. I know them real well. We can fix problems. This is not what's going on in public schools. We can fix it if we need to, but this is a distraction, and it really undermines public confidence. It makes it easier to take a voucher and do something else. So I feel like it's time that the public education community needs to stand up and say, we're doing the right thing for your children. The only indoctrination that we want to do is make sure that they bathe regularly, show up on time, do their homework, and be nice to others. And I think we all kind of can agree on that. The next issue that we have, one of those dynamics, is the need to improve. Education improvement is what we do, getting students college and career ready, giving them the skills that they need. And we have some exciting initiatives in Alabama that's going on. We have the Literacy Act. How many of you heard of the Literacy Act? Probably a little. This is a state investment of resources in early childhood reading. Now, what you probably heard about those who had is if your child by the third grade isn't reading at a quote sufficient level, they don't get to go to fourth grade. This past year, this was the first time that the Literacy Act, what we call the death penalty, came into play. And I'm proud to say that, just under 94% of our students went ahead, they weren't held back. Now, we can celebrate that, but what we also need to know is that doesn't mean those students are exactly where they need to be. If you were just on the margin and you made it to fourth grade, you're going to need additional supports and resources. And we also need to understand what sufficient is. It isn't proficient, it isn't grade level, and so that's a base level of education. This is where we need to be, and kudos to our State Board of Education. They have defined sufficient, but they're going to go up on the cut score, on the test score of what sufficient is over the next 3 years. I point this out is that we are moving in the right direction. Our standardized test shows, both on ACAP and NAEP, show this. So the investment is paying off. We should be proud of this as a state. Next thing, Numeracy Act. Heard about the Numeracy Act? It's actually the math version of the Literacy Act. I will say overall in the state of Alabama, but even nationally, math performance is really lacking. And we know we have troubles. We have some school systems in this state that have one certified math teacher. This is really a challenge for us. It's hard to get kids up to standards if the teacher isn't even certified in that area. So that is one of those areas that's very positive that we're moving on. But again, it's an investment by the state legislature in coaching and in training of our professionals that's going to move us in the right direction. Not where we need to be, but again, we have made the efforts, and Alabama is one of the first states in the nation to have a Numeracy Act, so we're very proud of that. Workforce development. Actually, we have a new workforce development. I don't really want to call it a diploma, but this is one of those trends that you need to look at. Short-term positive could be long-term negative if we're not careful. Last year, the legislature changed what had been known as Alabama's 4x4. That is that every graduate has to have 4 years of math, science, reading or English, and social studies. They backed down the math and the science for students who are going to go into the workforce right after education, not going to college. That's good and fine as long as those students don't decide 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now that they do want to go to college. Maybe they're doing great in their straight job and the manager says, hey, we want to put you on a management track, and they don't have the prerequisites to go to college. So the other thing we need to be careful about this is that we don't track students. The reason we did the 4x4 a long time ago was to make sure students had the option of college or career. Because Alabama has some intense workforce needs, this was an initiative not by the State Board of Education, but by BCA and the governor's office. And so this one you need to watch. That next area there is, yeah, it would help if I advance my own slides, wouldn't it? Sorry about that. The next one there is our weighted student funding formula. This is hot off the press. The Alabama legislature this year passed the RAISE Act. And what the RAISE Act is, it is a small step forward about changing the way we fund our public schools. We left our current program in place, the foundation program, but for the first time ever, you're going to get additional funds in Dothan and Houston County and all your systems based on what type of students you have. If you have English language learners, if you have special education students. And so this is very exciting. The state took, let's see, I'm going to show you what we have. Right. All right, there we go. The state took $108 million in a reserve fund that it had, and we're going to talk about state funding in a minute, and took another $58 million of other line items in the education budget, put them together and allocated based on weighting in these categories. This is what it's going to look like for Dothan. I'll show you Houston County in a minute, but you're going to get additional funding for gifted students, for English language learners, for special education students, and for students in poverty. For Dothan, it's about 1.3, almost 1.4 in new money. That's new money. Again, it's total, it's about closer, just under $2 million. $2 million. And so that is a step in the right direction. Here's what it looks like for
Right there.
Houston County, yay. This is what it looks like, and I have the numbers there. It is based on your student allocations. Now, Montgomery doesn't give you money without strings. And there are some strings attached. There will be additional accountability programs or applications that will come with this. And there will be performance metrics for each of those students. The goal of the legislature in funding this program is to see improvements in those areas. Now, they haven't spelled out what those metrics are like, and I want to pick on one in particular. It is wonderful that we're finally getting special education funding. We got very nominal funding from the state. Special education is a federal mandate. You'll love this. When the feds passed it eons ago, they committed to funding 40% of the IDEA. They've never never funded more than 20%. Right now, we're probably at the 10 to 12% rate. So this is something that falls on the states and more significantly, local school boards. But because not having enough money is not an excuse not to be able to provide these services. So this is wonderful. But on the other hand, what kind of metrics are we going to have to show improvement in these areas? Because by nature of special education, it is individualized. So we haven't figured this out on the state level. Short term, I'm going to be a little bit cynical. It's going to be a little bit more paperwork and a little bit more hassle till we get it streamlined. But that is something that your school administrators are going to be dealing with for some time. All right. The next one, the Choose Act. This is Alabama's school voucher program. It passed last legislative session. I will be very candid with you. Every Alabama education organization, school board superintendents, teachers unions, principals, we all oppose this act. We also all knew it was going to pass. This is a little bit of an issue that's more partisan. Most of your R states are adopting, or your red states are adopting these type voucher programs. I will say our legislature made an effort to make it a little bit more controlled, because in Arizona, in Indiana, states that already have these voucher programs, they are busting the budget. Our legislature said we don't think there's going to be that much interest in that program. They capped it. So let me explain how it works. They capped the program at $7,000 per student, and if you're homeschooled, at $2,000 per student, up to $4,000. So that was the cap, and they made it very limited to what kind of expenditures that these funds could be spent on. It's tuition, after school, some basic type things. Contrast that to Texas, just passed one, as did Tennessee. In Texas, they get $10,000. of her, a student. So going forward, these are some of the criteria for the Choose Act. It becomes in Alabama fully functional or universal in 3 years. The first year will start this fall. Students will be eligible for those programs. The application period for parents ended in April. And I will say the initial results, with some, I believe, orchestrated efforts, show that there is in fact a lot of interest in that. There were just under 37,000 applicants statewide, but year one, to qualify, you either have to be a special ed student, the first 500 are reserved for that, or have the income limited. The income threshold is 300% of the poverty level. Now, for a family of 3, that's about $89,000, so that's not really low poverty. But those are the thresholds. But we had about 37,880 of those folks were in the Houston County Dothan area, according to those records. Now, that doesn't mean that those folks are actually eligible this year, nor does that mean that they have been accepted in a private school. Because part of the Choice Act, or part of the angst that we have as the traditional public education community, is that the private schools can cherry pick the students. They don't have to take anybody. They can only take a certain amount of folks. The other issue is there are a lot of places in the state that there are no private schools. So it seems to be that it's a little much of a middle class entitlement program, because if you're at the lower end of the economic scale, to go to a private school means you have to find your own transportation. You probably have to pay for lunch and some other programs that are currently provided for public schools. So the question really is this a program that everybody can participate in fully? The other issue is what I brought up already. Will parents already in private schools take advantage of this program? Based on those 37,000 some odd folks, 68% of those applicants were already in private schools or were homeschooling. So these are subsidizing folks who have not been in the traditional public school system, nor do they want to be. What that is setting up going down the road is that Alabama is going to be funding 2 systems of public education. We still have our needs in our traditional public education, but now, and if parents think that they're eligible for $7,000 per student, why would they not want to do this? There's just minimal issues. So that's probably going to be a budget issue in the future. And so that is our next area that we're going to look at. The trends we have to be concerned about in the future is how we're going to fund all this. Here's some more things about the Choose Act. Threats to the Education Trust Fund. Alabama is one of 2 states that has 2 different budgets or 2 different ways of funding general services. The ETF is basically your state income tax and sales tax, a little bit of the SSUT, the online sales tax, and a few small taxes that are committed just to education. That is for our universities, our public schools, and our junior colleges. And so that is the $9.9 billion budget that the governor just signed from this past legislative session. Alabama has been in a wonderful trajectory in terms of its education budget because the economy has been good. When the economy is good, because the ETF is sensitive to income and sales tax, which is sensitive to the economy, we have been in a boom situation. Record budgets for at least the last 5 years. That's exciting. It's so exciting that the legislature got a little concerned and they started setting some of the money aside into these reserve funds for time when times were leaner or when other costly programs have come up. So threats to the ETF would be the Choose Act. As I said, in Indiana and in Arizona, these programs are bankrupting the state to the extent they have grown substantially. We know there's going to be a push for more funding. Just last week, the legislature already committed more money for the Choose Act than it initially said it was going to. When the Choose Act was passed, it was going to be at least $100 million each year. This year we had $100 million, then they took $80 million from one of those reserve funds and already going to commit across the top another $100 million at the closeout or the start of the next fiscal year. So already we're front loading more money into this program. The weighted student funding formula, which we love, which benefits public education, is a foot in the door. Research shows that if you spend more than $1,000 per student, you get the equivalent of about 77 more days of school. That's incredible, but we're not there. Overall, the RAISE Act was about $220 per student. Of course, it was targeted in those areas, but you need to keep in mind where we are. With record education budgets, schools today have less earning power than they had in 2008. Let me say that again. Schools today have less earning power than they did in 2008. From 2008 to 22, there was a $1,100 per pupil increase in expenditures. We are still really at an $806 deficit because of inflation. Costs are going up and new programs come on. Some of you went to school, we didn't have to worry about AI. We didn't have to worry about cameras on school buses and special ed rooms. We didn't have to worry about safety security with panic buttons. The cost of educating students has gone up generally, but also there are new programs and services we have to add to that. So those are two pressures. The goal is to increase money for weighted student funding. They can't, money has to come from somewhere. Right now, if you recall what I said, the money is coming from one of those set aside pots. They made a 3-year commitment. In 4 years, that's going to have to come out of general revenue. At the same time that the CHOOSE Act is going to become universal. Meanwhile, because things have been so good, there's been an effort to cut back on taxes, both property taxes and taxes going into the ETF. You may have read that the legislature has reduced the grocery tax by 1 cent, the statewide grocery tax. That's good. And in this case, it was offset by the expiration of another tax credit, the overtime tax credit. So we kind of swapped out benefits. But going forward, we're going to have to watch this because we can't keep giving away for even the best of causes, rural hospitals, tax-exempt hearing aids, if we're going to maintain these programs. Also in this education budget that just was signed into law, we have now 2 new benefit programs, a workers' comp program for educators, and for the first time, paid parental leave for babies for both male and females. It's a little bit limited on the males for our education workers and our state workers. Good things to do, but they all cost money. We already know we were paying more for TRS, that's our teachers retirement system, and for our health insurance. So all these cost factors are coming on in a time where, depending on what you read on the news, whether we're going to be in a recession, the economy is going down, or tariffs, what's going to happen. So these are all pressures that impact our programs. Remember, I talked about the Numeracy Act. I talked about the Literacy Act. We're going to maintain fidelity and keep those programs going. We've got to keep the money flowing. It's just that education is an expensive endeavor. The next one, workforce challenges. I'm going to go a little bit quick on this. You're experiencing the same thing, but superintendents, my team in the room, is there a teacher shortage? Yes, there is a teacher shortage. In addition to the great retirement, it's impacting all professions, but significantly it's going to hit education in the next 2 years because our retirement is based on the best 3 years out of the last 10, if you're phase 1. A lot of folks, because of legislative increases to the salary matrix, have had 3 really good years. Some of them are saying, hey, adios, it's time to go. So we have a shortage, we're having more retirements, and the pipeline is pretty dry. There are some cases where there used to be a handful of students in some program, there are 0 teacher education candidates. Could go on about that, but I think a lot of it is the stigma that has come with public education and trying to serve children, but also there are a lot more other opportunities, and there are fewer workers. Artificial intelligence and individualization will impact things too, but these are our biggies. The takeaway for it is we've got a big job to do, but the talent pool may be a little bit shallow. So we need to do what we can to shore that up right away and to keep the people who are in our classrooms still in our classrooms. last but not least, who's in charge? The big issue on the federal on the federal stage is, will there be a U.S. Department of Education? Now, in all my years in education, I've never found anybody who's a big fan of the USDE. And as we know, President Trump has said his goal is to abolish it. It will take legislation, it will take congressional action to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. Not to say that can happen. I will say some folks are a little bit skeptical. What I am trying to tell you, it won't happen quickly. There also are a lot of federal laws that require a Department of Education or some other entity to do work. IDEA, I mentioned special education law. That's a big one. Title IX. These roles and responsibilities will not go away. Certainly they can be shifted to other entities. Now, if there is no USDE, that means that maybe some of these initiatives will be pushed down to the State Department of Education. So then the question is, does Alabama State Department of Education have the capacity to handle these new programs? That's probably an open question. But I will tell you, the idea that this is going to free us from regulation or rules or strings is probably a little bit unrealistic. I've been doing this 39 years. I have never seen a program where people give you money for free. If you know you're from Montgomery or you're from the government, they're going to tell you how to spend it. They're going to tell you what you have to do. And I'm not going to ask any of my educators to look here. I have great respect for Dr. Mackey and the Department of Education, but part of our problem in terms of burdens and regulation actually comes from the Gordon Persons building too. There's not a lot of flexibility there. So if you're going to switch one group of bureaucrats for another, you're going to get some relief. I guess the positive that I see out of this is that the people that we need to influence will be a lot closer to home, but don't look for any changes real quick. But what we also see is some changes with the executive orders. We've had a couple of our school boards that are hurting because some of their grant programs have already been deferred out. Birmingham City lost $15 million in a mental health counseling program over 3 years. Poor Selma, hit by a tornado, had saved some of its COVID money to use it to repair schools, and because they hadn't used it right away, it was taken off the table. So these changes that are coming from Washington are going to impact what we can do, our programs and our policies, but that probably is TBA, to be announced. We're just going to have to track that as it goes. But Alabama gets a lot of federal funding for education, so it will make some way. And finally, the other dynamic that we're seeing is who's really making the rules. I can tell you certainly in the last 10 years, the power shift has been from the State Board of Education as the state policy making body to the Alabama legislature. You know, good, bad, or indifferent, it is what it is. For example, let's look at our cell phone policy. Governor Ivey passed into law a policy or a law that's going to require our school boards to have policies to eliminate or to prohibit cell phones in the classrooms. Most of our school boards already have policies eliminating or reducing this. But the legislature and the state board has a regulation doing this. But the legislature is getting into the act. A little bit of a war story here. ASB was involved in the legislation ordinarily to say, hey, we got it at the local level, we're good, we can do this. But it became an issue, and it's happening across the country. And some of it's vendor driven, I will tell you. The vendors who make these little gander pouches that your cell phones can go into, go to your national conferences and speak to legislators and speak to state boards of education, and they come back and pass a policy that most of our boards already have about, you know, trying to reduce cell phones. Now, the big issue, like any policy is it enforced? And that's what our legislators were telling us. Hey, well, there's a policy, but they're not enforcing it. And so the legislature really wanted to put in a teeth in that cell phone law that just passed that would penalize school systems for funding if they would do it. Now think about how that would work. How would you penalize a school system for funding for what one teacher in one classroom might do, or what principal. So fortunately, we were able to get that penalty provision out, just like we were also able to get out, one of our good-hearted legislators thought, well, yeah, get rid of the cell phones, but everybody should have theirs for 10 minutes. How in the world would we be able to, with 2,000 students in a high school, regulate the 10 minutes of free cell time? Wasn't practical. So we got involved in that. But the question is, if you make local policy, you can make those changes and react to what's happening. When it's a state law, it's very difficult. So we're seeing a little bit of shift of who's making the decisions, and a lot of it's coming from Montgomery. So last but not least, our takeaways is all these. The biggest takeaway is you can impact every one of these trends. You, as a community activist, as a supporter of public education, you can influence all these. You make a difference. When I was first hired for the association, I was told that the community sets the standards for the schools. And I truly believe that. School boards do a lot, teachers do a lot, superintendents, enormous work. But if the community, if people like you in this room do not consistently, regularly support your public education, you will not get the quality of students and the quality of public schools that your students deserve. You make a difference, and it isn't just at election time, or it isn't when certain issues happen and everyone's mad, or everybody's celebrating. Your sustained support and commitment, what you say, what you don't say, what you do, what you don't do, matters for public education. You matter. We need you in public education. So, treetops, what do we need to go back and talk about?
Over the last 8 or 9 years, Alabama was ranked 48, 49 nation. We have since moved up in the last couple of years,
In some of our NAEP results, yes. That's positive, and what we're talking about, I will say those post-COVID, in some of the NAEP results, other states are stagnant, so it is some improvement. I don't want, we should be proud of that, but some of it is the lack of movement in other states when you're looking at NAEP. Look at our ACAP scores. NAEP is taken by probably 20% of the students every 2 years. Your better indicator of where our performance is our state testing program. But I like to use the bump up in the last year was good, particularly it does show what we did in the reading initiative and COVID being back in class worked. But to some extent, other states are floundering, so sometimes there's more people behind us. It's not as much as a large increase. Just being honest, but we're moving in the right direction. When other people lost, the fact that we're not going backwards is really wonderful and are making improvements. So there's a lot to celebrate, particularly in literacy.
My concern is special needs, special ed, because in my day, the budget nowhere near covered the cost for special needs students. In fact, we had to take $10 million out of the general fund to fund it. Now, I'm grateful for the RAISE Act, but even that, in my day, wouldn't cover it. So, the CHOOSE Act, I understand, but if we take money from the system that's covering special needs, how do we pay for the special needs? Because we know, anyone in the system, these students may need 3, 4, 5 different kinds of doctors or help, and it costs money. And so we also know is that our parents tend to put their special needs kids in public school and put their other kids in private school. So that's taking money. So my whole concern, I don't care about all that. My concern is special needs. How's that?
Yeah, no, that is. I think this is a tremendous effort. The first time the state has put forth a commitment to it.
Great.
But everything you said is absolutely true. Most of your private schools are not equipped to provide services or special needs students, and they're expensive. And the state has finally recognized that. But again, it's not. We're not near where we should be on that.
So can we work with the state? Maybe they don't really understand the depth. I'm not saying they don't, because we got smart people. And, but can we work with the legislature to actually come in the school system and see what's going on with these kids?
Love it. Invite them all you can. I will say of those 4 categories that we weighted, they did put the most money in special ed. Now, the other question is, we had a lot of money on the table this year. We could have put more money in the RAISE Act if we wanted to, so that's a question of policy. If you really wanted to move the needle on those special ed students, there was more money available this year to be able to put into that, but that's not the way it turned out. All right, other questions?
To show you the magic trick. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. I can do that all the way up to 12. And I learned that in about the 2nd grade, and I can master any math problem you send at me, except my 8-year-old grandbaby in the 2nd grade is trying to teach me how to build a grid, put 2 numbers together. A lot of us feel like education is left out. I'm the one who needs the 2 on my grandbaby.
There's been some pushback on the new math standards. What I think the shift was, and with any new concept, maybe we didn't quite get there, is that students were taught to memorize and could do things by memorize, but they didn't understand the concepts behind the mathematical concepts. And so now they're focusing a little bit more so students understand why 2 plus 2 is 4, be able to do that, to be able to do higher level math. But the rollout of those standards caused a lot of heartache, and it is difficult to explain those. But I think we're headed in the right direction, but we're not there yet. Other questions? Yeah.
I know they touted the number of applications for the Choose Act and the overwhelming majority of students that were already in private school. Do we know the percentage of public school students who were actually accepted? And do we know how many of those were special ed were actually accepted?
Great questions, but no, not yet. These are just people who have applied for the program. That doesn't mean they've been accepted into any school at this point. And so that's the next step. And it will be interesting to see who's accepted. You know, this to me, if anybody's a private school operator, this is a boon to private education. Why would you not hand out the forms at, orientation? Because, it saves your parents, a lot of money. Or you could go up on your tuition knowing that 7,000 of it's going to come from the state of Alabama. But we'll be monitoring that, because I think it's the point we're making. We know those schools don't have those special resources for those high needs children. And so to the extent they will still largely be in public education, or will leave and then come back to public education. It's happened in other states. So you could, that's what, we see that. We know that's going to happen. All right.
Thank you, Sally. I learned a lot. I guess I always do. If you remember, today is a board meeting, and we'd love to, if any new board members are rolling over in July, if you would love to come to the board meeting. I know you want to spend some more time with me, an extra 30 or 45 minutes on the meeting. Next week's program is Everly Bolton with the Friends of the Library. Again, and then the next board meeting is June the 9th, but today is the board meeting. Let's see everybody there. If we can all stand. Of the things we think, say, do, if the truth is there, all serve, will be on goodwill and patience. God bless you and have a great day.